Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our GE2 class. And this afternoon, we'll be discussing the varieties and registers of the spoken and written language. Okay, so we are expected to learn the following learning outcomes at the end of this class. So to determine culturally appropriate terms, expressions, and images, which includes sensitivity to gender, race, class, etc. And number two is to adopt cultural awareness and sensitivity in communication of ideas. Okay, so let's first discuss the language varieties. Okay, what is a variety of language? Okay, variety refers to any variant of of a language which can be sufficiently delimited from one another. So this includes social, historical, spatial, or a combination of these variants. Okay, an example of this is Pidgin. It's a new language which develops in situations where speakers of different languages need to communicate but do not share a common language. So a lexifier is a particular language where the vocabulary of a pidgin comes from. So an example here is the Nigerian pidgin or the Bislama spoken in Vanuatu. In the Philippines, this would include, this pidgin would be our konyo, for example. Have you heard of the konyo, Filipino? They say they are made up of rich people, rich students. But actually, somebody commented on the post about the Konyo language that it started from Colegio de San Ignacio, or a group of Spanish students actually comes together and they were speaking Spanish, and later on it just expanded to be popularized by the students who enrolled in Ateneo or LaSalle. So somehow they they mix up the Tagalog with the English language, but in a elite way or socialan way. Somehow it doesn't really. Some people are not in favor of that because sometimes it sounds funny. Okay, so an example of that would be, let me see here. Okay, let me share to you another screen. Where was it? Oh, wait. Oh my, I closed it. For example, like I told you not to do it, you still do it. Now you look at. So something like that. Or sometimes when they say, can I make tusok-tusok now, the fish balls? So these are some examples of those pidgin where it was invented. So is that an example? Okay, another example is the Spanish chabacano. So it's a combination of the Spanish and of course the Filipino, but later on, oh no, it's not pidgin, it's now Creole, I think. So it's a Creole from a pidgin. So when the first people, the Spanish people, were communicating with the Filipinos, so they came up with their combination of Spanish words and Filipino. So that's how the Chabacano was invented, and later on it was passed along to the children, so that has become a Creole as classified in this language. Okay, so let me share this back again. Okay, moving on. So that's the pigeon. So moving on. Wait. Okay. So that number two, we have the Creole. This is a pidgin that becomes the first language of the children in mother tongue. So as my example, we have our own, in the Philippines, we have our Chabacano. And we also have our regional dialects. This is not a distinct language, but a variety of a language spoken in a particular area of a country. So in the US, they have these examples, but in the Philippines, we have the Bisaya, Cebuano or Bisaya regional dialects. Then we have the minority dialects, for example, the Maranaos, the Tausug. This is a variety of used as a marker of identity, usually alongside a standard variety, but by the members of a particular minority ethnic group. When we say minority, it doesn't mean that they are weak or poor. It's just that it's not so well known in a particular place. Then we have the indigenized varieties, spoken mainly as a second language in ex-colonies with multilingual populations. So like they have their Singlish. We also have our Taglish varieties. So that's where I think the Konyo language falls in more. So what else? In multilingual population, sometimes we mix up Tagalog, the English, and the Bisaya in one sentence. So, and later on, this becomes indigenized. So that's where the Konyo language comes in. So Konyo, let me clarify, Konyo is not a pidgin. It is an indigenized variety. So our pidgin is the Chabacano. What else? We have our language registers. So what is a register? According to Nordquist, a register is defined as a way a speaker uses language differently in different circumstances. So determined by factors as social occasion or the context, purpose, and audience. So these are the things that will determine what kind of register we will use. So it also determines the vocabulary, the structure, and some grammar in one's writing and even in one's oral discourses. So we have 5 distinct registers. That's according to Nordquist of 2018. Number 1, we have the frozen. Frozen registers refers to historic language or communication that is intended to remain unchanged, like a constitution or a prayer. So for example, we have the Holy Bible, the United States Constitution, the Bhagavad Gita, and Romeo and Juliet. So these things never change. So they are frozen in time, no matter what time it is. Then number 2, we have the formal. It is used in professional, academic, and legal settings where communication is expected to be respectful, uninterrupted, and restrained. So slang is never used and contradictions are very rare. So examples of formal registers are, for example, you're delivering a TED Talk or a business presentation. In written form, we have the Encyclopedia Britannica and the Gray's Anatomy by Henry Clark in a book, as a book. So these are formal registers, examples of formal registers. They're not loaded with emotions in that case, and they maintain not a close distance with the audience, but safer distance. Okay, then we have the consultative. This is used in conversation where they're speaking with someone who has a specialized knowledge or who is offering advice. So the tone is often respectful. For example, the use of courtesy titles. Then, uh, what else? For example, here, so we have the consultative. It is used in conversation where they're speaking with someone who has a specialized knowledge or who is offering advice. So the tone is often respectful, like the use of courtesy titles. For example, you're talking to a doctor, so you say always say doctor, but maybe more casual if the relationship is long-standing or friendly. If we have known each other for quite a long time already. For example, a local TV news broadcast or an annual physical examination, a service provider like a plumber. Okay, so consultative na siya move on. Then the casual one is used when they are with friends, like close acquaintances and co-workers and family. So for example, if you are in a birthday party or in a backyard barbecue, so the tone would be quite different. Number 5, we have the intimate. It is reserved for special occasions and usually between only two people and often in private. Like an inside joke between two college friends or a word whispered in a lover's ear. So that level of intimacy. Then with with language registers, they are classified as number 1, formal language registers. So it's more appropriate for, this is in written form. Okay, it's more appropriate for professional writing and letters to a boss or a stranger. So what characterizes it is impersonal, meaning it is not written for a specific person and it is without emotion. An example of these are business letters or letters of complaint. For example, they are actually addressed to specific persons, but they are not loaded with much emotion. Another example of these are some essays. Essays are your thoughts about an issue. So it is usually delivered in a formal way of writing. Some examples of reports, like business reports, financial reports, or official speeches like SONA, or special announcements or professional emails. Okay, I mean these are written form, not SONA, but the written form of the SONA. Okay, so when you talk about informal writing, okay, so formal rules, those were separate words. Rules in formal writing. So number 1, do not use contractions. So instead of saying can't, you say cannot. So say have not instead of haven't, is not instead of isn't, and many other types of contractions where you combine two words into one using an apostrophe. But of course, you can use apostrophes to show ownership or to show the plurals of certain words, like numbers. How many sevens do you have in a sentence? So you use an apostrophe there. It's still considered formal. Then spell out numbers which are less than 100, like 19, 78, 72, 6. But if it is more than 100 already, like a 3-digit numbers, you have to write it as figures. Okay, write in third person point of view. Okay, so when you say first person, it refers to the speaker. So avoid using words or pronouns like I, we, you, or us, because those were first person pronouns. The second person is you there. And so we should use the third person, like even with research, for example, you notice that the researchers, even though it refers to yourself, you address yourself as, or you label yourself as the researchers. They decided to choose this type of sampling, blah, blah, blah. What else? He or she. So those were a third person point of view. So it becomes impersonal that way. Next, avoid using too much passive verbs. Passive is, for example, the bone was eaten by the dog. Active, the dog ate the bone. So what's the difference? When you say passive, the subject is the receiver of the action. In this case, the subject, the bone, was eaten by the dog. So the subject there is the receiver of the verb eaten. But on the active, the subject is the doer of the action. So the dog ate the bone. Because there are some cases where when the doer is not as important as the action itself. So that's why you use the passive form. For example, classes were suspended in all tertiary levels. So it's not important who suspended the classes anymore. What's important is the action. So classes were suspended. But if the person who suspended the classes are significant or is significant, then you have to use the active voice, which is the president suspended the classes in all tertiary levels. Okay, next, avoid using slang or idioms or exaggeration, or we call it hyperboles, and cliches or hackneyed expressions or overused words like awesome, cool, check it out, or okay. So, and other stuff like that, because they would fall into informal languages but never in the formal language. For example, in business, you can never use figures of speech, for example, or idiomatic expressions. Better use the more formal equivalent of the word. Then avoid abbreviations and what we call this, acronyms. Okay, avoid abbreviations and acronyms. Okay, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. You can actually use the abbreviations after you had spelled it out for the first time. So the next time you will mention NASA, you can just use NASA already. So the Department of Education, or DepEd, blah blah blah, acknowledges the contribution of blah blah blah. In the next sentence, you may use the word DepEd alone. Okay, influenza is the shortcut abbreviation. Its abbreviation is flu, but the whole word is influenza, so you have to use the whole word. Philippine pesos, you can use PHP. Okay, next, do not start sentences with words like and, so, but, also. These are conjunctions. So here are some good transition words and phrases to use in formal writing. So you use this. Nevertheless, additionally, instead of saying and, you say additionally. Instead of saying but, starting the sentence with but, you say however. Okay. So, and many more. There are many other transitional words which could be used to begin your sentences. Next, always write in complete sentences. Sometimes we are not aware that we had already used run-ons or incomplete sentences. Sentences that actually does not have a subject or a predicate. So that's why we call them run-ons. So you have to make sure you have to edit your work before you send it to somebody or to submit it. Then write longer and more complex sentences. You can use different types of sentence patterns and types of sentences. We have simple sentences, we have compound complex or compound complex. So that adds variety to your words, to your compositions. Okay, moving on. Okay, now let's deal with informal language register. So this is a conversational and appropriate when writing to friends or people you know very well. So examples of these are personal emails or phone texts, short notes, friendly letters, most blogs, and even diaries and journals. So it takes an informal nature. So there are no major rules to informal writing, but you can include things such as slangs and cliches. The things that are not allowed in formal writing can now be used here. Figurative language, for example, when you write songs or poetry. Okay, symbols and abbreviations, acronyms, incomplete sentences, it's okay. Short sentences, first person, second person point of views, it's all right. Paragraphs or no paragraphs in terms of structure, it's okay. You can insert a joke or two or personal opinions about matters or other extra punctuation. So you can either use a passive or active voice. This is more loose in terms of its rules as compared to the formal style of writing. Then with the neutral language register, is not necessarily formal or informal, so it's in between formal and informal. So this is used to deliver facts. We have a wrong spelling there. Okay, so this is not my slide actually, it's just got it from slideshare.net, so I can't even edit it. Okay, so I can even download it. So I'm opening from the site itself. Okay, so an examples here are the reviews or articles, some letters, some technical writing as well. So neutral language, so it's not intended usually for a specific audience. So you're just stating the facts. Okay, so much for this. So that ends our lesson for today. And I'm gonna post an additional the pages where it can be found on our book. Okay, so I hope you would read the book so that you can have a more thorough understanding about these topics. That's all. Thank you and God bless.